I'm reading a quick bio. It says it's your life's work and career goal to significantly secure the internet. Really, Roger?
Yeah, I since almost from the very beginning, I've been since 1987. I've been in cybersecurity since 1987. I've been trying to figure out how to significantly get rid of hackers and malware. It is something that I think about many hours every single day. I have since 1987. Think about it hours a day. I wake up to thinking about it. I go to sleep thinking about it. I neglect a lot of my real work thinking about it. I've written probably 50 articles about it. I think about it so much that on my honeymoon to my beautiful wife 27 years ago, I was actually during our honeymoon. I was up in our room writing about how to significantly more secure the internet. And my wife was out at the beach. We're in Myrtle Beach at the time, and I remember she didn't get mad at me. She knew how driven and passionate I was about this particular subject, and I thought I married the right woman. And then she still understands me to this day. It is really something that drives me, that I've thought about a lot. So when I make recommendations about how to fix the internet, I'm not saying it lightly. I may not be the most intelligent person in the world, but I have thought about the problem a lot.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen, from the horse's mouth, or from Grimes' mouth, so to speak. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Secure IT, where we discuss all things cybersecurity, people, trends, and products. Thank you for joining us on our continuing journey as we move on past our milestone podcast 50 and head towards 100, hopefully. Today, we will revisit one of our OG members, Hall of Famers. I'm eager to get to the matter at hand, so no long introductions, except for the fact that what stood out when we last spoke, and that was in October of 2022. Um, Roger Grimes actually drove an ice cream truck at one point in time, and there was so much that I remember that we're going to take this in bite-sized pieces till I catch you up. First was his career path, driving an ice cream truck to Evangelist at one of the larger cybersecurity companies know before, and a lot of exciting stops, if I remember right. So CPA to boot, pre-med in addition to that, Roger. And I do remember this footnote. I had to cheat. I had to look at the transcripts a little bit, but you hated math.
Ah,
So we spoke in October of 2022. It's been a couple of years, but for those of you who want to catch up, we'll add a link to that amazing podcast in our show notes. In addition to that, what came across is your passion from this earlier snippet that we just did on saving the world, and it's not something. It's not a tagline for you. You live and breathe this to the point of jeopardizing your honeymoon. A few of the things that we spoke about, we talked about in October of 2022, was that firewalls were highly overrated and we're going to be redundant. You said zero trust, we're going to need something better. That's a technical term. We talked to great extent about non-phishable MFA. A few stats that you had given me so much so that I keep quoting them ever since then was that 90 or 95%, I don't remember accurately, of MFA was phishable. And you also said that ransomware, and you called this one early, that 70 to 90% of ransomware originates from social media.
social engineering.
Okay, um, so some of the things that we spoke about on our last October 2022 podcast was that firewalls were highly overrated and were going to be redundant. Um, Zero trust, meh. That's a that's a technical term, Roger. You talked at length about non-phishable MFA. I think that was a big one. In fact, you had mentioned that about 90 to 95%, and you can correct me if I'm wrong,
Nope.
of MFA was phishable, and we did quote you subsequently. And you talked about ransomware attacks, and the general bane of cybersecurity was the fact that 70 to 90% of attacks came through some form of social engineering, and why not look at that first, right? Social media being a subsection of that area of cybersecurity that we need to pay attention to. And we looked a bit into the future at that time. So we talked about defense or password algorithms that could counter the impending use of quantum computing. And we left that as a little teaser in our last conversation. I hope to come back to that today. Format's going to be changing a little bit. We're going to dive into the meat of the matter. Since then, you've written a book, but more than that, Roger, I'm going to ask you to catch us up and what's been happening in the last 2 years since we last spoke.
Well, I love those topics. Those are actually still very timely topics you brought up. That really, and let me say, like the stat of 70 to 90% of hacking involves social engineering. That's been true since the beginning of computers, right? And that really hasn't changed. Although I think I used to say that, and I still say that. Unpatched software and firmware are involved in about, according to Google Mandiant, about 33% of attacks. That seems to have increased, particularly due to ransomware and a couple of ransomware groups, to, I would say that it's probably closer to 40%. I don't have data, but it seems more than 33% these days, closer to 40%. MFA, I still am a big proponent for phishing resistant MFA. I was the lone voice in the wilderness for a long time. I can remember arguing with Microsoft and CISA and the leaders of those groups going, hey, you need to say phishing resistant MFA. I would still say, sadly, that 90-95% of MFA is easily phishable. That's Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, Duo, and stuff. But both of them, all three of them, now encourage phishing resistant MFA. They actually have and they've actually always had phishing resistant MFA, but they're encouraging it more. There's more configuration around it. And even, like a big thing that's probably come out since we last talked was FIDO passkeys. And those are phishing resistant. I like FIDO passkeys. Probably the only thing bad is that there's 1.12 billion websites. It's a lot of websites. You'd be hard pressed to find 200 that work with FIDO passkeys. If you were to take FIDO passkeys and YubiKeys and everything that's phishing resistant MFA, added it all up together, I bet they don't work on 500 of the world's websites. So they certainly don't work on 1% of the world's websites. And so that's the sad thing, is we actually do have stronger solutions like, Yuba passkeys. I'm a big fan of them, or FIDO passkeys, or some of these other phishing resistant options. But sadly, it's still not widely adopted. Passwords still rule the world. So now I'm a very strong proponent of password managers. I think everyone should be using a password manager, not in the browser. It should be a standalone password manager like OnePass or something, OnePassword. And if you're not using a password manager, I think you're putting yourself, your family, and your work at more risk than you otherwise need to have.
I'm frantically taking notes. Wasn't planning on because I want to come back to a few of these. So good, you've got the same level of energy since 2022, if not more, and you've written a book. Tell us more.
Yeah, I think since 2022, I've written 3 or 4 books. But and I'm even starting on a 16th book. I'm working on my 16th book, which is called
Wow.
How AI and Quantum Impact Cyber Threats and Defenses. So I'm heads down doing that. But my fifth,
16 books,
yeah,
Roger. Take a pause. So in the last segment, I did introduce you as a prolific author, and that stands. Tell us more,
Yeah, so
please.
the latest book, though, is Taming the Hacker Storm, a framework for defeating hackers and malware. And it came about because I've been doing this since 1987, thinking about cybersecurity. And I've watched as we get all of these supposed great solutions, next generation firewall. Uh, Forget about antivirus. We're going to do an endpoint response and defense. And we're going to have these great network intrusion defense devices. And oh my God, we'll give you $1 million if we can't detect a hacker. And it just goes on and on and on. And not only do hackers and malware still exist, it gets worse every year. Every year. Today,
Absolutely.
over 73% of internet traffic is malicious. 57% of email is malicious. It's 40% of organizations get a data breach of some sort, ransomware, password theft, stealing Trojan or something every year. I mean, it's pretty bad, and it's just going to keep getting worse. And I get, in my book, Taming the Hacker Storm, I say if there's one surprise I have is how bad internet crime has gotten, and that we're not doing anything significantly different. So in that book, I'm like, hey, I've been thinking about this. I proposed the solution 20 years ago. I proposed it to Harvard, to Princeton, to MIT, to CISA, to lots of people. And a lot of people agree that this would be a solution that, if implemented, would work. And I tell people, well, if you don't like my solution, we need to come up with a solution, because what we're doing today does not work.
No kidding. It absolutely doesn't. You've given us a little hook on a possible solution, and there's an upside and there's a downside. And as we were talking and getting ready for this show, we talked about your solution having a lower downside to the huge upside, right? And the concept of that you had earlier raised was social engineering, which still stands, I presume.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes.
Tell us.
No, so yeah, again, social engineering is involved in 70 to 90% of all successful hacks. Here's a stat. It actually comes from Barracuda Networks in 2023. This stat still blows my mind. Probably out of all the stats, this is the one that blows my mind. That spear phishing emails. So spear phishing is when a hacker is targeting you specifically, or a group you belong to, like C-level employees at a corporation or something. Even though spear phishing emails account for less than 0.1%, so less than a tenth of a percent of all email attacks, it accounts for 2/3 of all successful data breaches. Not 2/3 of email initiated data
No,
breaches, 2/3 of all data breaches. One thing. And it stems from people being able to pretend to be somebody else or a brand that you would trust more than if you knew that it was a Russian teenager, somewhere.
sure.
And that is a big part of why the internet is so bad, is that you have all these attackers, literally tens of thousands of companies and gangs, millions of people, that their day job is hacking you or your company. And yeah,
Absolutely.
and most of it, not all of it, but most of it,
Right.
70 to 90% of it, begins with somebody pretending to be somebody else. That's a big problem.
Buy the book and get the answer. To a possible solution, but you've come out pretty strongly. You're talking about a framework, the subline, the subtagline is a framework for defeating hackers and malware. This is not possibly defeating, this is not going to defeat, this is emphatically stating that this is a framework, a solid framework for defeating hacking. And I want to put that in place with, we've talked about the successes of zero trust to a certain extent, and we've said earlier and we mutually agree that zero trust in itself is not the epitome of or a solution for
Yeah,
all evils, but
yeah. Just real quick, I love zero.
please. Yeah,
I love zero trust and the promise of zero
right,
trust. One of my major problems
right.
is nobody knows how to define it. And a little trick I do when I meet, like I met this guy that he's an acquaintance friend of mine. He's from Microsoft. I used to work for Microsoft. I love Microsoft, but he's like, I sell zero trust solutions. I said, tell me what zero trust means to you. I've asked that of many people, and they never, or never the people selling the technology. Like you and I can talk about what zero trust is and what it means, but the guy selling the technology can never really define it. I'm like, that's a problem.
It is, Roger, and just let's start with the name, right? And please do rewind. I think let's pat ourselves in the back. We were wise back in October 2022 when we had this discussion. And one of the things we spoke about in our 10-minute conversation on zero trust was the name itself. Briefly, we talk about accounting and building trust, or HR teams building trust. And then there's this tenant that comes from the IT team that says zero trust. There in itself is conflict right in the title, right? Do I trust or do I not trust? Which one is it? IT says don't trust, HR and success and building teams say trust. Not being facetious, but right there in itself, we're causing conflict with our teams. Social engineering. I want to close out on that before we move ahead. Roger Grimes, we're human. Um, I want to take you back to your ice cream truck days, right? And there is an analogy on, a Trojan horse, and I mean we can go in a lot of different directions. But look, the success, the reason, so social engineering, leveraging social engineering to attack is so successful is that basically we're human, and we will, I hope and pray to God, remain human. And therefore will continue to fall prey um, to the tips and tricks that come our way, right? And the latest one was uh, a conversation 8 deep between me and a so-called vendor that was then forwarded to my CFO to say, hey, look, here's a whole conversation. Please pay this invoice. And she almost did, right? Beautifully done. I mean, pat on the back for these guys to now think constantly outside the box. Comment on that. Comment on the fact that we're always going to be human. And yet here you are saying, look, focus on social engineering, and that's going to be the panacea for all evil.
Yeah, and let me say, actually, this kind of leads into my main solution in the book, which is my. I have a couple of pieces of the solution, but the main piece is that anybody that wants to participate in what I'm getting ready to say gets what I call a real ID. And let me say it's different from the United States real ID, but it would be an ID that is strongly assured, tied to your human identity. You had to show up in person to get it. You had to prove who you say you are, and then you get some sort of bound token, or it could be bound to your PCs or your cell phone or whatever. But my main solution, I call it pervasive selective trust, is that on a per connection, per service basis, anyone can say, I want you to provide your real ID. And both people, anybody can require it at any time, and the other side gets to choose whether or not they provide it. So if I connect to my bank, Bank of America, they could say, Roger, before you connect, I want to know you to use your real ID. Or I could say to my email server, I don't mind. I could go to my email server is Microsoft Office 365. I could say to Microsoft, hey, before someone sends me an email, I want them to prove their identity. Like I get 100, 200 emails a day. I get a lot of people being jerky to me and stuff. I even get a lot of paranoid schizophrenics and stuff. And I would love to be able to say, I don't mind you calling me a jerk or saying my idea is the wrong idea, but I would like you to put your name on it, because I think when people identify themselves to their human identity, they're a little bit less mean. And I wish I could say that. Okay, you can email me, but I want to know who you really are. I don't want you to be anonymous. And if not, I want to drop your email, right? I wish I had that choice, but I don't have that today. My email server has to accept all of these anonymous emails claiming to be from Bill Gates or Elon
Awesome.
Musk or Twitter. So my
Yep.
solution
Right.
is on a per connection basis, both sides get to agree upon what type of identity level, and somebody can say, I want to see your real ID. So if my aunt is asking me for money in Facebook saying she's traveling and she needs money, I go, oh, just show me your real ID. Or if,
Mm.
and then let me say, also conversely, if I'm connecting to my cancer support group or drug addiction group or something, I could say I want to connect anonymously, and they can say yes, we'll allow you to connect anonymously. When I'm connecting to my crypto bank, maybe they allow me to connect anonymously or using a regular what's called pseudo identity, which is an email account and password or something. But it really would be nice to prevent this because social engineering is always someone pretending to be a person or an entity or a brand. They're pretending to be Microsoft, Google, Facebook tech support. They're pretending to be the
Right.
IRS. They're pretending to be a toll company or something, or a parent or a child or a coworker or your boss or something. And it would be nice to be able to go, okay, I'm fine with getting ready to do this weird thing you're asking me to do that bypasses company controls to send you money, but I want you to first verify with your real ID that you are my CEO. And if they don't
Right.
provide it, then I'm not dealing with it. That's the central part of my solution is on a per connection basis. Anybody can require somebody to provide a strongly assured identity that they had to show up in person to get, that is bound to a device that is difficult to steal, forge, or imitate. And that, I think, would get rid of the vast majority of pretenders. Because the problem is right now, if I go rob a bank, a real bank, there's over 1,200 bank robberies last year in the U.S. Actually, down 1990s, there was like 10,000, but there's less, so there's like 1,293 in 2023. Half bank robbers get caught during the first bank robbery. Almost all bank robbers eventually rob banks till they get caught. They get caught, identified, arrested, charged, tried, put in jail. And if they get out of jail and they rob another bank, they get caught and they get put in jail longer. It is great disincentive for you and I, if we're down on our luck with no money and we need money, we don't go rob banks. But on the internet, you can rob people all day long, and the worst thing that will happen to you is you're just not successful during that one attempt, and you get to make 60 million more. And so it's all profit, no
Well,
risk,
exactly.
and it's a recipe for people to commit crime, because why not if you're not going to have any downside? And you're probably going to get pretty good at it because you get to do it over and over again.
I'm hoping. I'm not hoping really, but is Los Angeles still the bank robbery capital of the world? It used to
Oh, I
be.
don't know, but I guess that makes sense.
Minnesota.
They probably have more banks and credit unions than anybody else. I bet you're right. I bet you.
Both on movies and in real life. This was from the 90s, Roger. But let's go back to Real ID, okay? Why not use Real ID?
Well, I mean,
I mean, I know that with Real ID today, I can walk to PSA with my phone, my TSA, and actually use my app to get through TSA. So they've got a
yeah.
very high
Real
level.
ID is a physical ID. Mine's for more online IDs. But so I
Right.
would in my world, and let me say that when I create
Right.
my solution, I go here's the framework. We can
Mhm.
massage how it works. Like, what does Real ID mean? What are the criteria you would have to meet to be able to do it? So, like, one of my criteria for the highest level is you have to appear in person, because I think that gets rid of trust, right? You have all these remote people that if you don't require them to show in person remotely, there's going to be a lot of fraud happening. So mine says show up in person, because then you're at greater risk of being,
That's
detained, arrested, or whatever, identified. But some people, like it was interesting. Yeah, I can't get a DMV ID remotely, but I can. Most of us can get a passport remotely. So there are ways to do strong remote
true.
attestation and assurance. Yeah, so that's kind of the idea.
Yeah, I'm going to gently nudge you towards Real ID and using one form. Of course,
Yeah,
Real
the
ID
only thing is,
can
like,
be
I have some people that come to me and go, "Well, my company makes this really great biometric thing." And let me say, I'm not a huge fan of biometrics all the time,
right.
but I think if you have a strongly assured identity, you should be able to participate as the
I
online
agree.
Real ID, versus the US
Right.
government has a little bit more narrowed focus of what can qualify for that.
They do.
Mine would expand to be anybody that can say that we have a strongly assured ID, that's reliable, hard to steal, hard for somebody that's unauthorized to reuse, has been confirmed to an identity. And let me say, even like with government Real ID and DMV, there's imposters, right? The U.S. government
Right.
has spies, and they give them fake identities, and they get fake passports and fake driver's license. I had a roommate that was a SEAL team member 20 years ago, and he had a couple different licenses and different names as just being part of the SEAL team, being able to sneak into different countries. You're going, the DMV is not perfect. You do have people that get forged licenses. They bring in forged identity. They bribe the DMV people, to get those licenses. It's not perfect, but if we had something like that, it would just get rid of this onslaught of, a million email accounts are stolen every day and reused by attackers. In my system, if there was a identity that was scamming someone, they would report it to a centralized, what I call global trust assurance service. It's a global allow block list, actually at the nation level, and it would say, "Hey, this ID, Roger's ID, was stolen." And someone submits it for the first time, it's being used maliciously, and immediately it would become marked in red on anybody's computer that had Roger's email account. And they would know right now Roger's email account has been confirmed as being used maliciously, or it could be in yellow, which has been reported but not confirmed. Green is reported and confirmed not to be malicious. But then while the attacker is using my email address, it stays in red. But if I regain control of my account, it would pop to yellow and maybe eventually to green, showing that I can keep control of my email account. And so if an email address, and let me say again, about a million emails are stolen every day. Accounts. I get emails from lots of people who are trying to ask me for help regaining control, which most of them never do. But it would be less valuable to the attacker to have, because it would be now marked in red on a global block list as being used maliciously, at least right now. And so there would be less incentive for the attackers to steal them in the first place, and they're less valuable to the attacker to continue to use it, because now it's marked in red as being compromised.
Yep, agreed. So to sum that up, um, you used an acronym. You didn't use the acronym. You gave me the long version. PST is what I remember, but the solution is called pervasive
Selective
uh,
trust.
PST. Okay,
Yeah, the
good.
internet has pervasive
It's selective.
anonymity, meaning
Yes,
anybody can
it
click.
does.
Like I can go to Twitter or Facebook or X and get an account called Bill Gates, 1943 or whenever he was born. And as long as someone
Absolutely.
hasn't used that, I can use it and then put Bill Gates's picture with it. And there's a lot of people on the internet would think, oh, this is a verified account on X. It must really be Bill
Right.
Gates. But all it really meant
Okay,
was
right.
that you used an unused email address or whatever,
That's
and
true.
you successfully
True.
said, yes, this is me when they sent you an email, and now you're Bill Gates.
You briefly refer, as we're dabbling in this conversation and selecting options, you briefly alluded to spies and fake IDs, but spies and FBI and CIA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, fake real IDs, right? Fake real encryption keys, fake real everything, right? But to get past the bad guys, it's got to withstand those tests. And so I agree, it may be fictitious, but the infrastructure is real, the encryption keys and the IDs and everything else. B- Before I move on, um, you've been consistent on one thing. You've said, look, there are two ways to talk about authentication, so to speak, right? For lack of a better word, as we get into pervasive selective trust. One is I can be on the internet and I can give you everything. I can walk into a physical place and prove who I am, and I can use that. Or if I prefer, as you've said with banking and crypto and everything else, I can be anonymous but yet fully verified. Um, let's revisit that conversation for a bit because you did allude to it again today, and you've been consistent on this theory that you know depending on the type of transaction, I can either be fully visible and authenticated or stay anonymous and still be authenticated.
Yeah, actually, the third option, which you also mentioned, was I really have three things. There's real ID, highly assured, tied to had to be in person. There's a not, and I call it today. I call it attempted anonymity. I used to call it guaranteed anonymity, but I've realized over the years there's no such true thing as anonymity on the internet. So I call it attempted anonymity, and then everything else is in the middle, which I call pseudo identity or pseudo anonymity. That's how it's referred to in the identity ecosystem, which means those are it's like everything we use in the internet. I go to X or Twitter, Instagram, and I choose an account name, and it verifies my email address. Those would be things that are kind of in the middle. They're trusted and lightly low assurance by the identity service provider that's given it to me. There is some assurance. It's an email check. It's not a lot, but it's something. And that person, and even that person, may potentially know who I really am. Right? Like I think. X and Facebook, if you get with the blue check mark or whatever, supposedly they're tying it to your real identity, even if the handle you're using is Big Mike 32 or something like that.
Right, right, right. No, good. Thank you for that. So, FIDO, we talked about it briefly. I agree with you. It's a beautiful thing. It's solid. It's great infrastructure. Yet, it hasn't really caught on. The infrastructure is in place. It passes the sniff test. Why, as you look at the lay of the land, um, you know, have we not been really good at implementing it? Is it cost? Is it a heavy lift from an infrastructure point of view? What's holding us back?
Lack of will. People in general, like we're in cybersecurity and we think, oh, you got to have this. People in general don't even want passwords. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to do anything that is any harder. They want to go to their device, go to their app, have it work.
And Roger, pause for a moment. That's not a bad thing.
Okay.
They're the
Okay.
customer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? No, well, look, can I drag you down into the area of, the greatest, not the greatest generation, sorry, baby boomers, right? We've been doing things a certain way. And please hold your thought because you're making a very important point here. So we're moving on to the Gen Xers, the Gen Ys, the Gen Zs, and whatever the heck it is now, are saying, look, why? When I can walk into a room and demand the music I want, and either Amazon or Siri or whoever is going to play it for me, and you come from a generation of you and me, Roger, where we have to rewind and fast forward cassette tapes. Don't judge me. I mean, why do I need a password? You can scan me, verify me, fingerprint me, MFA me. Why the heck do I need a password? So please, keep that in mind. That's your customer, and let's continue the
Yeah,
conversation.
Philip, I think that's a great observation. And I do think ultimately 10, 20, 30 years from now, the ultimate authentication is very what's called frictionless. There's no friction. And it's just maybe it's like the Tom Cruise Minority Report where it scans your eyeball. I don't know. But
Whatever, right?
you know, I think you make a very astute point that I don't think it's wrong of them to want to not be bothered. But we do right now, we're like, okay, you can have your music, this, that, but we have to have some controls because if not, bad guys will take over your music account. You can't fully enjoy the availability, CIA
Sure.
availability, the last piece, or you can't get to your bank account or your website is being denial of
Agree.
service attack. So, but it is, I will say that like, I'm a big fan of FIDO, although as much as like FIDO, besides it's not being used in most places, the other thing is, remember how I said social engineering is involved in 70, 90% of attacks? I think if FIDO went to 100% and we're all using FIDO pass keys or whatever, again, which is a technology I like and think people should use instead of passwords,
Absolutely.
I think
Yes.
that you would still have people like they would send you to fake websites. They would ask you to enroll your FIDO pass key in the new website, and it looks just like your other website. And the vast majority of users wouldn't realize that they're being asked to make a new one. They're just going, oh, yes, 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 because they don't understand how FIDO works and they really wouldn't. How many times have we been told, oh, you got to choose a new password? You got to do, how many times I got to relog in for some reason? I think that if it went wide scale, as good as FIDO passkeys are, that most users would not understand how they work and they could be tricked out of it or tricked around it. It does solve, it is phishing resistant, which is great, but I think we're still going to find that humans are tough to defeat. Or Bruce Schneier, I think 20 years ago, and I'm paraphrasing him. I could be saying it wrong, but he said, "It's amazing what human beings will do to get a screensaver of pigs flying out of somebody's butt."
Or,
You know, just he was just trying to say if appropriately motivated to go to that cool YouTube video, they will say yes to anything, right?
and Roger, small correction, it's the guys. It's the guys. It's the male of the species that want to see the pigs flying out
Well,
of
I
various
think
body parts. And,
yeah, I do
yeah,
agree. I do agree. As a matter of fact, and I'm digressing here. I got a Geiger. My grandkids, 10 and 12, were in town this week at my house, and I wanted to give them a cool thing to play with, so I gave them a Geiger counter. I bought like this cool Geiger counter on
nice.
Amazon, and immediately
Yeah.
the 10-year-old turned to the 12-year-old and said, "I want to measure your butt." And I thought, I
Of
was like, I'm
course.
pretty sure my granddaughters would not have had that response. So I do think a lot of boys are different. But
Yeah, yeah.
with that said, again, I think it's just amazing. Like even had stuff where I've walked up to people. I've been in two contests or two projects where we just went up to random people in the street, said, "I'll give you a chocolate bar or a pen for your password." And people, what percentage of people would tell you their password? About 40% to a stranger on the street.
Wow.
Even
Wow.
when I was with Foundstone for a couple of years, where I was a
You
penetration
were.
tester and stuff, and I taught hacking
Mm.
expert exposed. And I remember I would go to companies for the CEO's password. And I would show people this all the time. I would walk up to the CEO's executive assistant and go, "Hi, I'm Roger Grimes. I'm with Foundstone. I've been hired to do password penetration testing auditing. I need to know the CEO's password." How many times did they give me the CEO's password? 100%
Oh
of
my
the time. And
gosh.
sometimes the CISO would be behind me and he's like, that executive assistant doesn't even know his passwords. I'm like, oh, aren't you cute? You don't,
We've seen this,
yeah,
Roger, right? We in red teams,
yeah.
and you go drop
Like all you got to
USB
do is
keys.
ask people. Like they
Mhm.
just don't really understand the risk and what they're doing, and it's and maybe we shouldn't require them. I feel like I've got to have basic security requirements to operate a car and know how to brake, but pretty soon cars are going to be self-driving, so maybe the future they don't need
We're
they
there.
don't need to know how to brake.
Tesla's just launched its robo taxi in Austin. So um, let's talk passwords, and I'm going to give you this all in one big ball of wax or ball of spaghetti and ask you to unravel it, right? So as you talk about real ID and a digital real ID, so to speak, uh, my immediate reaction is one more authenticator, so to speak, right? I've got Microsoft, I've got Google, I've got my LastPass, I've got my RSA, and I've got token generators, and now one more, right? So let's keep that in one place. I like the idea of having a password manager, as you said, Raja, because it's seamless, it's automated. I hit a button, it changes my passwords where necessary. I just have to remember one phrase. So if I'm bopped on the back of the head, I get my phrase, it's encryption, I'm back, right? And let's add one more strand of spaghetti. This is my life right now, right? This is my wallet. It's only got some emergency money, a driver's license only because I have to, and an emergency card. The rest of it is all Apple Pay and Google, and everything's on my phone. And if this separates from the phone, it dings. It's worked so far, and the keys are on here. Tried it internationally, works well, except this morning at the gym, Roger, when Martha, the friendly neighborhood trainer at the gym, says, Philip, my daughter is doing a fundraiser at the local high school. How about a bar of chocolates for $2? And I'm like, really? I do not have $2. And promptly all the millennials at the gym saying, Martha, didn't we tell you, you got to do Venmo, you got to do something like that. So, it's still ironing out the kinks, but we're getting there. We're getting to simplicity. We're getting to a minimalistic life with ease on passwords and everything else. But, I should say, and let's go back to your comment that everyone should have a password manager. And I'm going to add one more to help you with your PSA announcement, right? And take your time in purveying this solution. You talked about YubiKeys, you talked about FIDO, and how do we walk around now till such time that the digital real ID or the PSA takes root? What can we do now?
Well, actually, I think you just said everything. I'm a big fan of Google Pay, Apple Pay for credit cards. I used to get my credit cards compromised all the time. And when I say all the time, like 6 times a year from traveling and stuff. I think mostly at gas pumps when I'm taking back rental cars. But since I've been using Google Pay and PayPal online exclusively as much as I can, I haven't been compromised. I think those are, and I think even the credit cards are going to move to the technology that Google and Apple
I
Pay.
tend to agree.
Yeah.
Right. I've been filled prior to all of the AI and the algorithms. I've been filling gas in Palm Springs and having lunch at the same time on a certain day, right, when cards were hacked. But yes, please continue. So I agree with you that,
Yeah. I
with all the algorithms,
Yeah,
it's
I do
safer.
think everyone should be using a password manager. And people will say, well, what about if that gets compromised? And that is a risk, and it's an individual risk you have to decide, or business
And it
risk.
did get compromised.
Yeah,
One of the large names.
yeah. But most of them, with the exception of one of them, most of them have not been hacked that much, and some of the leaders really resilient over time. But most of the time, the risk that a password manager, and I've analyzed them for decades, the risk that a password manager using one offsets is far greater than the risk of you having all your passwords in one place. If all your passwords are in one place, an attacker most of the time has to get onto your computer, and it's game over anyways.
Right.
And there are password stealing Trojans that kind of interface with some of the password managers, but they don't. They, I don't know why, but they don't go to the password manager and suck all the passwords out. And part of that's probably because most of the time your password manager is going to be closed, and I guess they'd have to monitor it until you opened it. The way that they steal the passwords out of the password manager is to insert a browser extension that steals the password when the password manager inserts it. Well, that's the same as you typing it in. So I was like, that's really, the same risk.
Right. It
But
is.
the
It's
risk,
pretty
yeah,
tedious.
the major risk that a password manager offsets is it allows you to create strong different passwords for every site and service. And it also, most of them don't work with phishing emails, phishing links. They, if I say, oh, it's Facebook, but it's not really Facebook, the password manager doesn't work with the fake Facebook. It's got the real URL and only works with the real one. Let me say a lot of password managers. So the risk that the password managers offset, which is allows you to easily create, use, and store long, strong, different passwords for every site and service, that prevents password cracking and guessing, and it prevents one website leading to you being compromised in 100 others because you're reusing the same password. And it doesn't work with phishing emails, which is a huge amount of risk today. 70 to 90%, right? Almost involve phishing emails. And that risk is so large that a password manager offset, it far outweighs the risk you might get from them stealing all your passwords at once. And that could happen, but it really doesn't happen. It's not even measurable in the number of times that has happened. Whereas you reusing a password and you being tricked out of your password, that happens, you know, tens of millions of times
Yeah,
a day. Right now we have something like 40 billion login names and passwords out on the internet, publicly available for anyone to look at. And I assure you, it has almost everybody's password, at least past passwords. And a lot of people, when they create passwords, use the same password or add something different to the end. I used to think I was brilliant. I said, my password, I had this root. Let's say that it was Frog Frog. It wasn't Frog Frog. Let's say it was Frog Frog. I said, oh, I'll just put different letters at the beginning and the end. Like I go to Amazon, A at the beginning and AA at the end. And if I go to Instagram, it'd be I at the beginning and I. And I thought I was just brilliant. I don't have to use a password manager. I got a different password for a long, strong password for every website and service. And then one day I went and looked up, if you go to like Have I Been Pwned? .com by Troy Hunt, it'll tell you how many times your password has been compromised. And the 15 or 20 times my personal login name password has been compromised, none of them had to do with what I did. They were all compromises of the Facebook, Adobe.com. They were all compromises, my doctor's office. They were all compromises of places I trusted to keep it safe, and they did not. And then
true.
I belong to another site called Dahash. I pay $10 a month, and you can literally look up anybody's password. And in there, I saw that here are the 15 passwords I was using. And you could absolutely see that there was a pattern. I went, oh my God, you don't have to be Einstein to see that Roger Grimes is using a password pattern. And I thought, well, this is the dumbest thing I thought I was smart at. And so that's why I've become a bigger proponent of password managers. And like you said, you mentioned it, Philip. I need to hire you. You said, and plus to update it. Now, when I need to update my password, I go update, and the password manager's like, "Oh, would you like to use this password?" And click here to say update existing password. And it's like click, click. It's just easy.
It's too easy. So, you have me and our listeners on the edge of our seats. Those sites again, have I been pwned.com and the
Yeah,
hash,
yeah. PWND, pond,
yeah,
pwned, pwned, pond.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
pwned, both correct.
dahash.com.
The hash.com. Good. So let's sum up and thank you for that conversation on password managers. And I'm going to give you my question first and then a comment. So you have some time to think about it. Since we're not being sponsored yet, Roger, your top three password managers as soon as I finish my comment. So my comments are this. Password managers will give you a security score to tell you not to use frog every time. So you've got that built in check. You can now set 20 character alphanumeric symbol passwords with ease, right? At a minimum, so that we get ready for what's coming next in terms of computing power against us. More importantly, at a press of a button, it'll replace and change passwords. Organizations can force this at work and do a BYOD separation. So you can have your personal password separate all at one place, and it's just ease of use. And so why not? So my question to you, are you free to name your top three?
I'm not allowed to name my favorite one, but I am going to today on your show. I will say that
Thank
I
you.
like any of the ones that have been, there's like 20 that have been around forever. I
Yep,
like them all. But I do think there is one that is above all others, and that is 1Password. It has
love it.
all those features that you mentioned. Not all the password managers have browser integration, and 1Password also. Another feature I love is that if your password is reported as being compromised, you belong to a website. Like one day I was using 1Password, and it's like, hey, you need to change your Facebook password because there's been a reported compromise. And I went and looked. I'm a journalist, and I'm looking. There's no reports of Facebook being compromised, but it turned out Troy Hunt knew that of HaveIBeenPwned.com. He had reported it. It's they interface with an API, 1Password does, with Troy Hunt's site, and they knew. And it wasn't, I went and changed I was like, I don't know what's going on, but let me go and change my password. Click, click, change password to a new long, complicated, truly random one. And about 5 hours later, all the news reports started to report that Facebook had some of their passwords compromised. So I like that. Let me see. I like them all. LastPass got compromised a bunch of times, including
They
it's
did.
now been proven that some of the passwords were like for a long time it was known that password hashes or password caches were stolen, but we had no proof
Right.
that the user's passwords were actually compromised, but we have now over the last half year learned very likely that some passwords were compromised from the last password hash. And I still like LastPass. The, they've been hacked like 3 times, and most of the other they're the number one, right? They're the big giant, they're the big target.
Exactly.
But one
Right.
password has not. And the way that they store the passwords in the cloud, even if the attacker gets to the developers of the cloud, those passwords aren't any good to them the way that they're stored. So I think they have a secure design. I think they have the best feature set as well. The only criticism I have of one password, I think, and I haven't confirmed, but someone was just telling me yesterday that it doesn't allow you to protect it with multi-factor authentication. Some of the other ones will allow you to protect it with multi-factor authentication.
True.
Well, one password lets you store your multi-factor, emulate your multi-factor with it, but it doesn't allow
Right.
you. Some people would really like to be able to protect it with an MFA versus a long passphrase or something like that. But let me say this
Great.
again: that I like all the password man, including LastPass. Like people, so I'm not using it. We use our browsers and email clients. They announce 20 hacks every month, and we still use them. Whatever I don't care if
True.
it's Gmail or
True.
Outlook or whatever, they're hacked all the time. And you just want the
Right.
vendor to be responsive, close the hole, listen to your needs. And I think the LastPass has been under a barrage, and they've been through the crucible of fire, and they're better today than they used to be. So I like LastPass. I like 1Password. I like the semantic one. I don't like the browser, excuse me, the browser-based password managers. They tend to be the ones that the password stealing Trojans dump right away. Like every password stealing Trojan I know dumps your browser password manager cache. So I think you should use a standalone one. And one day the malware, if we all went to a password manager, would maybe target it, but they're not doing it today. And so until I hear that they're being targeted in a large way, I say use a password manager.
Couldn't agree more with your choices as in password managers. Thank you for going out on the ledge and naming names. And I agree 100%. One other comment was when we're talking about browser, URL integration, password managers will catch a zero interchanged with an O in a URL and not let you go there. In addition to which, to allay fears, for the most part, there's a high level of encryption in storing passwords. And as the technology improves, they may get a URL and a username, but the passwords are stored at a high level. This has been a ton of fun, and I want to squeeze in one more question uh, with your permission, please. And that's about quantum computing and what's coming. Now, we were bright eyed and bushy tailed in terms of conquering the world with quantum computing, right? This was the conversation we've been having constantly for the last 2 or 3 years. We're now closer than ever to a commercially viable solution. No doubt, it's like holding an egg without moving, right? Because of all the qubits and stable states, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we're getting there fast. Um, what do you see from a risk mitigation point of view? Because one of the very profound comments made on this show 3 or 4 episodes back is that the potential for quantum computing is to erase encryption as we know it, right? Just because of the computing power and being able
Yeah.
to hack at a
Well, yeah,
very high
yeah.
speed.
First of all, it's quantum, the Q day, when sufficiently capable quantum computers can break a lot of traditional encryption. It mostly refers to the asymmetric stuff: RSA, Diffie-Hellman, Elgamal, elliptic curve, that sort of stuff. Some hashes and digital signatures, and also it halves the protective size of symmetric hashes. But that just means we just have to
Right.
increase the key size of our symmetric hashes to 256, and you're safe. But real quick, I do think Q Day is coming sooner than later. U.S. government said it was 2030 or later. I think the recent announcements by IonQ and Google and IBM, they're saying that they're going to have tens of thousands to millions of stable qubits in a couple of years before 2030. I don't. Public companies aren't saying, if they say something fraudulently, they can be sued for tens of millions of dollars. So I don't think they're saying it lightly. I think they have evidence that they're going to get there. So I think every company has to today, if you haven't already started it, start a post quantum cryptography project. You need to tell senior management what's going on, get sponsorship, start doing what I call the data protection inventory, which is inventory all the software and firmware you have in your environment, figure out what is the existing cryptography that it's using, what key sizes, and whether it can be easily updated or has to be replaced or reprogrammed or whatever. That's called a data protection inventory. It's going to take the average company a year just to get the inventory of what they need to do and figure out what they're going to need to replace versus update, and talking to vendors and stuff like that. If you're not doing this, you're late. Get on it.
Today.
Yes. The US government's been saying
I
that you need to be on
thank
it since 2016. And kind of the ironic part is I belong to a bunch of quantum forums at the Cloud Security Alliance and World Economic Forum and stuff. All those quantum scientists think that every company in America is doing this already. And when I tell them almost none are doing it, they're shocked. They think I'm lying. They don't believe me. I'm like, "Yep, you're in your little bubble."
Yep. Roger, this has been a ton of fun. Proof of the fact is that we budgeted 30 minutes and we're past the 45-minute mark only because time flies when you're having fun. And thank you for coming back. Great messages. You've served your purpose in life with your PSA announcements today. Any closing thoughts?
Nope, I'd probably just end back going to where I was with the taming the hacker storm, which is we can build better internet security solutions. We should demand better internet security solutions, and you, the listener, can be a part of developing that better internet security solution.
Well stated. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That was an exciting 45 minutes with the highly energetic Roger Grimes, who now has a select badge of honor of coming back twice. And maybe we'll do this again, Roger, pretty soon. Everyone, thanks for joining us on this episode of SecurIT as I continue the cybersecurity discussions and journey with our customers, vendors, end users, in this case, an evangelist for cybersecurity who lives and breathes what he says, helping us to learn from their insights, knowledge, and from their experiences. Do make sure to follow us and this podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. Please do DM me on LinkedIn, on X, with feedbacks, questions, comments, and kudos, or questions. Or we'll take it all. Thanks again, everyone, and see you next month.